we're going to start the open house. And it starts, it's going to be generally from 5 to 6 p.m. The open house will be just general discussion. It'll be a discussion from our planning consultant, David Jordan. Did I say it right? Dross. And he's with Horizon, that is in community planning. And he's been the one that he's kind of been the force behind putting all this together for us. And so he'll be able to address a lot of the questions that you and the public might have. But he's going to start off with about a 25-minute presentation, I think, and kind of go over what's been done to this point, and then we'll field questions. And I believe Lene has prepared some question and answer cards, which I think all of you were here when she asked if you needed them, but if you weren't, they're in the back, in the front, on the desk as you come in. So please feel free to fill those out, and then Lene is going to go through them, kind of organize them by topic, and then we'll discuss them in our general meeting, in our meeting that starts at 6. So that's how we're going to progress from here. During the open house, the questions will be fielded. Like I said, won't be fielded by the planning commission. We're actually going to kind of meld into the audience and listen and be able to take in the presentation just like you guys. At this point, I'll turn it over to Lene and David. Thank you.
So close. Morning.
Here. Again, my name is David Dross. I'm from the Horizon Community Planning. I was the project consultant for the Saugatuck Township zoning ordinance update project. So, quick introductions. Said David Dross, project consultant, working closely with Lene Wells with the line planning, who is also your contextual township planner. And also, we had picked up this project with a number of steering committee or advisory committees that were tasked with reviewing the township's master plan to determine in what ways master plan can be implemented by zoning regulations. So this project, a lot of the groundwork was done by these 3 committees: attainable housing, economic development, rural preservation and character. And then from those recommendations, the township organized a steering committee, which was tasked to begin development of the working chapters of the zoning ordinance. From that point, that was probably in 6 months or so of work with the steering committee. We began review by the planning commission over several meetings. And now we're at a point where we're prepared to present this to the public for your review. And so this is our first open house workshop, hopefully to give you a good overview of what's included in the zoning ordinance, and then to get your initial comments and feedback. Hopefully this will give you enough of a feel for what's in the zoning ordinance itself as well. So that you can review it with a fresh set of eyes after this meeting and come up with more questions or comments, which we'll be able to answer at subsequent meetings as well. So my role as the township consultant in this project was to first prepare a zoning audit report. So really just an overview report of the zoning ordinance to see, does it effectively implement your master plan? Is it something that's user friendly? Is it consistent with state law and case law? And then to prepare the actual zoning ordinance update based on that audit and based on the review comments and the recommendations from the advisory committees. So again, so today's objectives, we want to go over the highlights of this project, have a Q&A session after this presentation, and then have the opportunity here for public input. So just to kick off then, first off is what is zoning? Zoning is land use law, and the intent of zoning is to protect public health, safety, and welfare. So that's really the primary intent of zoning in the township. Zoning ordinance implements elements of the master plan, which I mentioned before, and as we said, there are the 3 advisory committees which review the master plan and determine that there are several items that could be implemented through land use regulation in the zoning code. Now the intent of zoning is to balance personal property rights, landowners' property rights, with the community goals to ensure that there's a reasonable use of land. So we cannot take away the reasonable use of land. We have to ensure that there's a balance between rights and the desires and goals of the community. Also to ensure that we minimize impacts and ensure that there's compatibility between land uses and between various zoning districts, which are mapped on the official township zoning map. And lastly, we want to, through zoning, is to establish a fair, equitable way to process the review of applications for site plan reviews, for rezonings, for subdivision plats. So a zoning ordinance has various roles and authorities that are identified, and then clear processes for review and approval of development proposals. So the purpose of this project was to, as I said, update the township's land use laws to implement the Tri-Communities Master Plan, which many of you are aware of, to implement the recommendations of 3 advisory committees. And then we wanted to create a user-friendly document that the general public can understand. A lot of ordinances that we deal with, especially the current ordinance, very dated, very difficult to understand, disjointed, not easy to follow. So we wanted to create, to the best of our ability, an ordinance that the general public would be able to understand how land use regulation works from A to Z. So, and with that, we want to ensure that there's predictability so that if we know a property is zoned a certain zoning district, we know what could potentially happen there. And if you were proposing something, a landowner should have the certainty that what they're proposing, if allowable in zoning ordinance, can be implemented, can be developed. In this ordinance, we hope that it would ensure quality development that meets the township's goals. And lastly, probably, and most importantly, the township does have a irreplaceable natural resources and important and special role character. So we want to ensure that this ordinance is embracing the natural resources and the character of the township to ensure that we're really preserving that character for future generations. Okay, as I mentioned before, the first step of my role in this project after the advisory committee work was to prepare the audit reports. The initial findings of that report, as I mentioned before, don't believe it effectively implements the master plan. And I think the advisory committees also found several ways in which the new zoning regulations can better implement the Tri-Communities Master Plan. As I mentioned before, it's a very disjointed ordinance. It's very difficult to follow. A lot of the terms in land use regulations are quite old and really based on a very old framework. And so it's not a modern user-friendly zoning ordinance. In our opinion, it does not ensure sensitive development. So there's opportunity to ensure that incompatible land uses can work together better between buffers and setbacks and other use-specific requirements that can ensure that development is sensitive to the environment, sensitive to neighbors. And there are multiple occurrences in the current zoning ordinance that are inconsistent with the zoning enabling act, as well as some more recent Michigan as well as national case law. And lastly, as I mentioned before, predictability is important with the zoning ordinance. We want to ensure that if it's something that is consistent with your master plan, that's a quality development that you want to see in the township, someone should have the reasonable expectation that it will be approved. So we want to ensure that the processes are predictable, the requirements are predictable, and that it's a document that the general public can understand. So you as citizens, and as developers, as landowners, as well as the attorneys and the professionals, all need to have a common understanding of the township's requirements and processes. And so this project did address all of the findings of the audit, as well as the 71 recommendations of the 3 advisory committees. So between the 3 committees, as I mentioned, 71 total recommendations. And the next 3 slides are just going to be a quick overview of the topics that those committees addressed prior to this process. I don't have all 71 written down here, but we do have some background reports that we can make available that show each and every one of the recommendations of the committees, and then how we incorporate them into this document. So first off, the Attainable Housing Committee, it's important to that committee to have very clear definitions relating to different housing products. So single family attached, duplex, townhouse, multifamily, accessory dwelling unit. On the current zoning ordinance, these are not well defined, so there's sometimes it's not very clear what we're allowing, what we're not. The committee also was seeking to encourage mixed use projects, such as those that have both residential and commercial. That could be within the same building itself, or it could be within a mixed use development. Accessory dwelling units, really that's kind of a secondary dwelling, could be a smaller secondary dwelling on a property. That could be attached to a dwelling unit, or it could be something that's detached. Attached housing options such as townhomes. So a lot of ordinances really address single family, detached, and then multifamily. And it's what we call missing middle type housing products that are really missing from a lot of zoning ordinances. So this draft does include townhouse regulations. So we have a number of more options for attached housing, such as townhouses. And also a minimum dwelling size. Right now we have a requirement. It's over 1,000 square feet, maybe more. This document does recommend through the steering committee and the planning commission a minimum dwelling size now reduced to 750 square feet. So that's quite a reduction to allow more attainable housing based on the committee's recommendation. Okay, our next group then was the Economic Development Committee. The committee looked a lot at our parking requirements concerning accounts, the design of parking lots, the ability to defer parking in situations where a site may be overparked, and also considering reductions. So the committee and then the planning commission as well, they wanted to ensure that there was sufficient parking on a site, but we did not want to overpark sites to reduce the amount of unused pavement. But at the same time, if there were changes to land use or expansion, we want to ensure that those parking areas could expand. So on site plan, we want to see an area where parking could be deferred and expanded if ever needed in the future. If the site didn't warrant it, there was a problem with the amount of parking. Site plan reviews thresholds. So the ordinance now includes thresholds for minor site plans, which can be approved by the zoning administrator and the planner. And then there are certain thresholds for planning commission and township board review, depending on the intensity and scale of that development. So we have very clear thresholds for site plan review in different types of development. The Economic Development Committee was also very supportive of rural businesses. So through the Right to Farm Act, anywhere you'll have farming, the Right to Farm Act allows for farm marketing to a certain extent. Beyond a certain point, though, it's considered agricultural tourism that is under local control. So a typical farm market is something that is allowable under the Right to Farm Act wherever you allow farms. But the committee was recommending a rural business option beyond what would typically be allowable through the Right to Farm Act. So that's something that's been proposed as a kind of rural businesses within our agricultural districts, our A1 or A2 zoning districts. The Economic Development Committee also was desired to encourage electronic vehicle charging stations, to acknowledge the charging pedestals as allowable accessory structures. And then to have, to ensure that there's the proper ratio between EV charging stations and normal parking spots for internal combustion engine vehicles. And lastly, solar energy. So solar energy as it relates to utility grade solar installations, as well as solar energy over parking lots, as well as accessory solar energy to power the structures and uses on a specific site. So we have a wide range of solar energy options for various scales within this proposed ordinance. Okay, and lastly, the Rural Preservation and Character Committee. So there are a number of very intensive requirements recommended concerning natural resource preservation. So a lot of this committee was concerning tree preservation. So we have a pretty significant tree preservation provision within our new chapter 11, which is our landscaping and the environments article of the ordinance. So the tree preservation section was based on Ann Arbor Township, which has probably one of the most innovative, progressive tree preservation zoning ordinances within in the state, and it's also an ordinance that's been tested by the courts within Michigan. So it's something that is very comprehensive. It prohibits clear cutting, requires replacement of trees. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot build the property, but it ensures that its development is done in a sensitive manner, and that there's replanting as necessary. And if there is illegal clear cutting or removal of trees, there's a reasonable replacement penalty as a result. Dark sky preservation. So the committee was very conscious about the impact of sky glow from parking lots, for site development. If your lighting is not able to incorporate cutout type fixtures, you can't have a sky glow effect that can affect other properties, can affect wildlife, can affect the night sky. So the ordinance does include dark sky principles for its lighting regulations. Also, sign regulations, we included more of a rural scale of signage that's allowable for our ground signs and wall signs for commercial and non-residential properties. The committee also looked at housing density bonuses and incentives, and really that ties into a lot to the bottom point there, which is plan unit development, PUD. So the PUD process we'll discuss a little bit later, but it's a process that's supposed to be a collaborative planning process between the developer and the township to meet the developer's goals as well as the township's goals, to include really require development that it shows a recognizable benefit to the township. And through that, we included open space requirements and provisions in density bonuses only when an increased amount of open space, all the open space, or even usable open space is preserved on the development site. And also the committee recommended low impact development provisions. So where we do allow for development, it's done in a way that's sensitive to natural resources and is designed within the constraints, natural constraints of the site. Okay, other notable changes, I might just go quickly through the next few slides because I wanted to walk through all of the chapters of the zoning ordinance so we have a good idea of what's in the zoning ordinance before we take questions and answers. So some of the other notable changes, we clarified and consolidated land uses. So rather than having very specific land uses where we have to say every single type of store, a shoe store, a convenience store, a grocery store, we consolidated some of those land uses just retail sales. And then we clearly define what that means. But where we generalize land uses, where there's a concerning land use, we've also, in those cases, we've specifically defined those uses that we want to specifically regulate. For instance, I think, for example, would be an adult business, retail. We do not want to just roll that into a general retail sales category. It's a sensitive land use. it can cause impacts if not planned, if not located properly. So something like an adult type of business would have to be its own separate land use rather than in a general retail sales. We have, with the generalization, we include a provision for similar land use considerations. So if the land use is not specifically mentioned, but if it's very similar to something that we do allow, we have a set of considerations to say that this is allowable within the zoning district or it's not. We've looked at really all of the dimensional requirements for various residential and commercial zoning districts. So lot size, setbacks, building height, etc. We've expanded the open space development option. So right now, there's a limited application allowance for an open space development option for I think this maybe one or two of our zoning districts. And this expands that. So an open space development options is it allows for a clustered development. So smaller and narrower lots when you preserve at least 50% of a development site. And that's something that's required by the zoning enabling act to happen in a zoning ordinance when zoning districts are pursuing density. The current zoning ordinance was restricting that to, I believe, the A2 zoning district. So now we've expanded that option to all of our residential zoning districts because it has to for state law. So we've expanded that option as like kind of a by right option to preserve 50% of your land. And then you can get the same type of density on a smaller area of cluster development. We've included our specific use requirements. So we have between 30 and 40 specific uses that have requirements that are unique to that use. So that could be things like a gas station, like vehicle repair, mining operation, drive-through facilities. So all these 30 or so uses are those that are unique enough based on their characteristics or their operations that have specific requirements to that use. We've removed land use variance authority. We're ensuring content neutral sign regulations and requirements based on recent case law. So with our sign requirements, we can really only say, what size of sign, the setback, dimensions, but we don't regulate what's actually on the sign. And that's based on recent federal case law. And also, I think it's important that we have a reasonable level of non-variance flexibility. So when you have landscaping requirements, parking requirements, and even architectural guidelines to some degree, we have times where we have requests for variances, and the standards for granting a variance should be very strict. There must be something very unique about the lot or the land for the zoning board of appeals to grant a variance. So a lot of times when someone wants to propose, let's say, landscaping flexibility, they have an idea that is comparable, but it's slightly different than our requirement. And we don't really have any authority to consider that without them going through a variance process. And they will likely not meet the strict standards for a variance. So there are several sections of the ordinance that build in non-variance flexibility that can only be approved by the planning commissioner or the board. But it's based on considerations and standards that are specific to landscaping, that are specific to parking, that are specific to lighting, rather than the variance rule standards, which are specific to the characteristics of the lot or the land. So happy to answer any questions on that later, but we built this flexibility to allow us some reasonable flexibility that meets really the intent and spirit of the zoning ordinance. Okay, next on this last slide, really are notable changes. We clarified our private street requirements. We revised site plan review requirements so that site plans are already typically non-residential development. That if it's a by right use, so we have a couple different land uses. We have by right permitted land uses, we have special land uses, and then we have prohibited land uses. If something is noted as by right, if it meets zoning requirements, it really has to be approved. So if it's a by right site plan for permitted use, the review standards need to be very objective. It needs to be almost like a checklist. You really shouldn't have subjective and discretionary review authority for a by right site plan. So we've updated those standards for site plan review for minor uses to be very objective, almost like a checklist. Whereas for special land uses, special land uses are those that, if not planned in a proper manner, if not considering land around it, there could be an impact on those properties nearby. So with a special land use, those that are noted as special, there is an increased amount of discretionary review authority that the planning commission can use when reviewing those types of applications. So with a special land use, there's also the opportunity for public input or a public hearing. So with a special land use, we have standards that are a little bit more subjective and give the planning commission that discretionary review authority to consider land uses on a case by case basis, to consider compatibility with nearby uses, consider environmental constraints and other things like that. So we really cleaned up the discretionary review authority and standards for special land uses. And also with special land use review, we've included a concept plan level review. So we have a lot of times where the folks will come in and they say, you know, we'd like to pursue this specific land use in this district, but we want to know if the township planning commission is even going to be open to this use in this location before we put in a significant amount of work into our architectural plans, our engineering plans. And so now we have a two-step process for that as proposed, where someone could come in with really a concept plan. And it doesn't mean we're giving up, you know, what we want to see in a plan, but there's the level of engineering reviews, such as like the stormwater calculations, the sizing of pipes, things like that. The planning commission really doesn't need to see that to determine whether or not it's an appropriate use for that site. So now we built this really a two-step approach for special land use reviews. So someone could come in before putting in a significant effort into engineering. They can run it by the planning commission to see if the use is appropriate for that site with the concept level planning plan review. And if the planning commission was open to that and approved it, they would then come in for a secondary final site plan with their detailed engineering at that point. So we're trying to be more user friendly in a way, but at the same time, we're not giving up any sort of review authority. We're not watering down the review process, but we're trying to be reasonable with development that makes sense. And lastly, the planning unit development process, as I mentioned before, excuse me, the planning unit development process is a process that's collaborative between a developer and a township. And the intent of that is for a developer to be able to earn modifications or waivers to some of the requirements, but only under certain circumstances to where that they are approving the project as a recognizable benefit to the township. So through this, the current PUD process as written is not real clear. As someone who has not reviewed a PUD under your ordinance, I was very confused on how it's done. And sometimes local governments will just say, well, this is how we've done it. This is how we generally divide it. But it might not actually say that in the ordinance. So we have a very clear process now for planning and development where you would have to run a concept plan through the planning commission and the township board. And there's a rezoning as a part of that. So there's a public hearing and a concept plan associated to that rezoning. The second step then is a final site plan, which is similar to the process I mentioned for special land uses, where the more detailed site plan would then occur after the township board approved the rezoning and the concept plan for that project. Okay. So the outline of the proposed ordinance, I know some of you have had a chance to page through it. If you haven't, excuse me. We have 6 main parts of the ordinance. The first being the introduction. Second is really the heart of the zoning ordinance, which is the zoning district regulation. Part 3 is development provisions, which is landscaping, lighting, private streets, parking. Part 4 is the review processes and standards. Part 5 is administration. And then 6 is definitions and checklists for development process. As long as I have my voice, I'll try to get through these next couple slides here. So part 1 on the left column there is really our article 1, which is our purpose and intent. And this really gives the legal framework for establishing the zoning ordinance. Outlines the entire organization of the document, And then the violations and penalties are mentioned up front in the introduction, chapter 1. And then I mentioned part 2 is in zoning district regulation. This is where we have, first off, general requirements and interpretations. So we have a list of all of our zoning districts and our overlay zoning districts. We have provisions for the interpretation of zoning district boundaries. We talk about principal land use versus accessory land use on property. And as I mentioned before, considerations for similar land uses when a land use is not specifically mentioned in the zoning district. So Article 3 and 4 is, again, this is really just kind of the heart of zoning ordinance. So this is all of our residential, commercial, and industrial zoning districts. And within Articles 3 and 4, we have land use regulation. We have a description of the intent of each one of the zoning districts. The intent with our zoning districts is to really have a hierarchy of density, intensity, and scale. So for residential, we go from A1 to A2 to R1 all the way to R4. So that really is the, going from our rural and agricultural areas all the way up to our more dense suburban residential areas. And then C1 to C3, our C1 district is really kind of our neighborhood scale commercial district, whereas C3 is more kind of a regional interchange scale commercial district. And then we also obviously have an industrial district. So these chapters, we looked at the intent statements for all our zoning districts, and we assured that we want to ensure that the allowable land uses within the zoning districts are reflecting the intent statements, how we describe each one of those zoning districts. We've also calibrated dimensional requirements such as setbacks and building height, lot size for each zoning district. And then there are building material and architectural requirements for these districts as well. Okay, then moving on in part 2, zoning district regulation, we have several overlay districts. So this is in Article 5. And overlay districts are addressing areas with unique characteristics that require really a more intensive level of review. So we have an area for critical dunes, interstate transportation and our major interchanges, natural river preservation, wellhead protection, and floodplain. So overlay districts are in this chapter 5, Article 5, which really give an extra level of review authority for the underlying base zoning districts based on those unique areas. And the intent is really to provide extra protection for natural resources or to allow for certain more sensitive land uses within the interchange transportation zoning district, for instance. Article 6, then, I mentioned before, PUD. This is really, it gives the parameters and the review standards for planning new development and how you can qualify for a PUD and how you can earn the modification of zoning district requirements. As mentioned before, we're not just saying, hey, to heck with zoning requirements for PUDs, but we're saying under certain circumstances, we'll waive this requirement if you are proposing something that's a benefit to the community. So this article really gives the outline for that process. Article 7 is our general provisions. So Article 7 includes uniform requirements that are going to really be across all zoning districts. So you have requirements for like docks and water access. They're not going to necessarily be tied to a zoning district. Structures, we address antennas, how we measure building height, fences, flagpoles, how we're screening of mechanical equipment on sites, pools, how we're interpreting and establishing lots, setback in yards, and private streets. So these are all general provisions that are not tied specifically to zoning districts that could apply township-wide. Then Article 8, I mentioned before, specific use requirements. So we have 36 individual land uses I mentioned before, and that they have stricter requirements than all other applicable zoning requirements. And as I mentioned before, like a drive-through facility or fast food restaurants, gas station, things like that, there's going to be specific elements of that type of development that we want to address specifically in Article 8. So all those 36 uses are listed in Article 8 and have their unique requirements beyond what we require for the zoning district, where they're allowed. Okay, Article 9 then is our lighting requirements. As mentioned before, the intent here is to ensure that we're embracing dark sky principles. We have plan requirements, fixture specifications, and we're ensuring minimum levels to make sure that site lighting is at a safe level for customers and visitors, but also maximum levels so we're not affecting adjacent properties or having a sky glow effect in impacting the night sky. Article 10 then, mobility, parking, and access. We've included a number of provisions, first off, for how we incorporate bicycle and pedestrian facilities internal to a site, as well as along the public right of way. So those are considerations that need to be included in a development proposal. We have minimum and maximum parking requirements, as I mentioned before, loading zone requirements, how you can park and store RVs on property. And then we get into a bigger picture of traffic issues like traffic, like access management, how many driveways you can have on a site, how sites can be connected so as to reduce the traffic impact. And then requiring traffic impact analysis for uses that generate higher levels of traffic to ensure that the traffic mitigation is built in through the traffic impact analysis process. And as I mentioned before, landscaping and the environment, this is probably the most significant amount of work that we put into the zone ordinance, especially concerning the tree preservation requirements. So our landscaping requirements in the township, we have front yard landscaping, we have buffers between potentially incompatible land uses. We have parking lot landscaping, so parking lot screening, as well as requiring shade trees within parking lots to reduce the heat island effect of the asphalt parking lots. We have certain tree protection zones in the township along major corridors. So the first 30 to 40 feet of specified corridors, travel corridors within the township, there are restrictions on any type of tree removal in those areas. Then we have provisions for grading and excavation of land. As mentioned before, Article 12 is our sign regulations. I won't touch on that again, but again, we're looking at avoiding the content-based regulation to ensure we're consistent with the federal court case. Okay, then part 4 of this entire book here is our processes and standards. And so I'll probably just breeze through these next couple of slides. But first off, we want to start with our general processes. And the point of this Article 13 is to have a uniform set of requirements that apply to all submittals. So we got probably 6 or 7 different submittals: site plan, special land use, UV, rezoning, site condominium. And we wanted to have just one chapter that says, okay, we first do a completeness review. We're not going to accept something that's incomplete and send it to the planning commission so that they're simply going to send it back to the applicant, table it. We want to ensure that the planning commission has a comprehensive, complete set of plans so that they can do their job. We want to ensure that the fees are paid, that the applicant is providing the information necessary for us to ensure that they're complying with zoning ordinance. We have information here concerning public notice requirements that are applicable to several different of our development types. When we apply conditions of approval, there's a set of considerations that apply to any type of development project. So Article 13 is really a kind of an overarching article concerning all of our review processes. And then the next couple of chapters here concerning we have site plan review for really all of our site plans, whether they're by right or special land use. Article 15 is our special land use review. So as I mentioned before, really the main change here is improving our discretionary review authority standards for special land uses. Those land uses that could have impacts on neighboring properties or the environment. As mentioned before, we do now have a 2-step process where one could elect to come in with a concept plan for use approval prior to coming in with their specific engineered final site plan. Article 16, I mentioned before, the PUD process. So that is the PUD zoning with the concept plan. And then again, later you come in with your final site plan after your property is rezoned to PUD. Article 17 is concerning condominium review. So it's just a similar to a platted development, a site condominium or a conventional condominium. It's a process that we run similar to a site plan review process, but it has its own set of standards and requirements that's consistent with the condominium act. Then Article 18. So early on in the presentation, I mentioned that to be granted a variance from a zoning requirement is a very strict set of standards. So what they say, most training, they say 9 out of 10 variances are typically denied. Because a lot of times variance requests are based on personal preference or really a self-created type problem. Whereas variances really should only be granted if there's something very unique about the lot or the land that makes compliance with the zoning ordinance unnecessarily burdensome. So we've really refined the standards for variance review. So they say compliance is so simply unnecessarily burdensome. There are unique characteristics about the shape of the lots concerning the topography of the land, for instance. It's not a self-created problem. So if someone divided a lot in a manner that they can only, for instance, build a 2,000 square foot home, but and because the setback comes into the buildable area, because they divided the property in that manner and they only left themselves the 2,000 square foot building envelope, that's really a self-created issue. But if it's something to where a lot was there and it's been there for quite some time, it's a lot of record. So maybe the zoning setbacks changed for that district. Someone bought the property and they didn't do anything to cause the issue, but they really inherited this issue to where complying with that setback it's not reasonable. It takes away reasonable use of the property. It's something that could be considered not self-created. A variance really needs to consider justice to that owner of the property as well as ensure that it's fair to the neighboring property. If it's an issue that's shared by everyone in the neighborhood, the better process is just to adjust the zoning ordinance rather than giving one person that variance. When you consider variance, you want to ensure there's not impacts on the other property. And lastly, you want to ensure that's consistent with the intent of zoning ordinance. So a variance review process is very clearly spelled out now, so that there has to be something very unique about the lot or the land to be able to get that variance. So as opposed to the flexibility we built into the other portions of the zoning ordinance concerning landscaping and lighting parking, for instance. Okay, and then before we get in here, Article 19, we have processes for considering amendments to the text of the zoning ordinance in the map itself, the zoning map. So when we review a zoning map amendment, so changing the zoning designation to a different zoning district, we want to look at the master plan, the future land use plan. We want to ensure that the allowable uses would be compatible with nearby land uses. We want to ensure that it would not affect public services and infrastructure. And we want to make sure that it would not impact unreasonably natural resources. So we have considerations for map amendments as well as text amendments. And also there's a process for considering conditional rezonings. So a conditional rezoning is really a voluntary set of conditions a landowner may propose in order to make the rezoning request more palatable for the planning commission and board. So it could be a case where it still needs to be consistent with the township's master plan and future land use map, but it could still be something where we may plan for commercial in a certain area, but based on this certain site, we may say, these couple of uses would probably not be appropriate, even though we plan for commercial. So a developer could voluntarily say that we are going to strike these couple of uses, or we are going to increase the setback, or we're going to do something to add voluntary conditions on our development to really satisfy concerns of the planning commission board. So there's a whole process for considering those types of requests. And it should be noted, this is not something where somebody can get zoning flexibility. They're actually making it stricter on themselves voluntarily to be able to satisfy the township's concerns. Okay, and then the last part of the ordinance is our administration. So we address our authorities, so the planning commission, the zoning administrator, zoning board of appeals, and the township board. So we've outlined all the authorities of these other roles that these four bodies. Article 14 is our non-conformity regulation. So non-conformity is really a legal non-conformity is something that was lawfully established. The zoning ordinance then changes. And so essentially what most people consider the grandfathered use of property or a building that doesn't need a setback anymore based on the changing requirements. There are certain restrictions on the expansion of a non-conforming building or the expansion of a non-conforming use. But we have built in that certainly continue the use of a non-conforming use that's not allowed in the zoning district anymore. You can expand a non-conforming structure as long as that addition is going in a direction that doesn't make the building more non-conforming. So all of our non-conformity regulations in Article 21, really it really have a grandfather type of section. And then lastly, definitions of checklist wraps up our presentation today. So appreciate you bearing through my voice tonight. So in the next steps, hopefully you guys can talk a little bit more, answer some or ask some questions and to further answer some of them might hopefully talk. So next steps, we're at a point now where this is our public review draft. It's not 100%, it's not complete. There's proofing that needs to be done. There's still a number of items the planning commission needs to walk through. We're going to record the input we get tonight, and the planning commission will certainly walk through each one of those either tonight or in future meetings. We will then, after that, prepare the final document, which will then be prepared for the official public hearing in front of the planning commission, which could be December, could be January, whatever the planning commission is comfortable with that document being official for your public review. So as again, this is our first public review draft. We want input tonight. We want your questions. It's not perfect. We're still planning to make changes, but we hope this is a point now where it's understandable. We understand the directions that we're heading, and then we can make changes based on your input. After that public hearing, then it would go to the township board, the elected officials, for their final review.
At this point, if members of the public would like to come up to the podium and ask any questions you may have, you can refer, if you have copies of the ordinance or you've got notes, you can refer to page numbers. We'll do our best to answer those questions. If there are very kind of specific parcel-based or lot-based questions, we might have to get back to you with those answers. And I did mention this earlier that there are some comment cards in the back of the room. We have a couple of just broad survey questions on the comment cards, and then on the back, there's room for you to share your contact information if you'd like, and you can also include specific questions or comments on that form. We are going to be digitizing that and putting that on the township website as well. So you can fill that out digitally. You can take it home. You can bring it back to the township hall. We've already started a matrix of comments that we've received to date. We've had people call and email. So that matrix will have the topic, it'll have the specific comment, and then we'll include a column that has comments from staff, from David, from planning commission, so folks know how those comments are addressed. So with that, I know it's a little awkward with the microphone, but feel free to come on up and ask questions, or if you don't want to, I'm happy to just interface here too.
I can, okay.
For
sure. My name is Jim Hanson, 2907 63rd Street. I know you need that information. Mr. Jurassic, you had two slides that talked about other considerations. Could you show me the first one again? Is that possible? Because there were issues on there. I mean, they were definitional primarily. I didn't know what they meant. It was earlier when you were doing your executive. Other notable changes, right? Okay, first of all, you're talking about adjusting dimensional requirements. I maybe would, speaking as a landowner in R2, I would just like to know if there are major changes or any changes that we have in dimensional, because dimensional is a key issue for everybody. It can make the difference between somebody with 20 lots or 25 lots, and that makes a lot of difference to a lot of people. That's a question I have. I guess without having read each district, I don't know the answer. Another question I had down below was remove the land use variance authority. I don't know what that means. And those were primarily my two questions on this slide.
You wanna?
Sure. Yeah, I think for the dimensional requirements, so setbacks, lot sizes, lot width, our intent was not to create non-conforming situations and make things stricter, but we did combine some of our requirements and we did some consolidation of certain districts had various scenarios for whether it was served by public infrastructure or water and sewer. So we tried to really kind of narrow down, consolidate those requirements. The goal was not to create anything stricter, to create non-conforming situations, but there were slight adjustments here and there to certain districts. But again, I think if there's anyone has specific questions, we can certainly go and make check. So kind of before and after.
Since I'm an R2 person, I'm interested in R2, but I'm sure there's other people in other places interested in that.
R2, I can answer that specifically because we did have some conversation about that with the planning commission. So right now, the minimum lot size in R2 is 65,000 square feet. And the current, 2.5 acres, it's 1.5. 43 by 60 is 1/3, so this is 65,000. That's what's in the current ordinance. In the proposed ordinance, it's the same.
Right. That's what I thought that was.
Hasn't changed.
But in terms of setbacks, are you making? I know that I'm an ex-planning commission member of several people. That's why they are, and so I'm kind of aware of that they were different in different places, and they had to do with whether or not you have public water and sewer.
Correct. We've had some comments recently over the last week, specific to the R2. We had a comment from someone wanting us to consider a smaller lot size if there is water and sewer available down to 30,000 square feet in R2. So that's going to be kind of more of that policy conversation with the planning commission.
Right. But at the same time, you also make this thing, I did read the general chapter for R2, and we say, well, that is really intended to be a district wherein city water is probably not, that is providing there's a need, but there's general, that's not the point.
And for others, the R2 area, it includes a lot of what is considered Kalamazoo Lake, Kalamazoo Riverfront. It also includes some of the Kalamazoo River and north of, it's part of the township as well as along the Alabama River comes through, and there are zoning maps in the next room. We wanted to hold as close to the dimensional standards that we have in the ordinance today. So you'll see that.
That answers. Yeah. I think you're speaking in generalities.
And then you mentioned the use variance.
Well, it says remove land use variance. I just don't know what.
Yeah, so, in zoning ordinances, you can do variances to dimensional standards, so anything that basically has numbers attached to it. And there's also a process that's allowed by state law. Although they've ratcheted back some of that, but state law says that if in the past, you know, historically, we've allowed use variances, you can continue to allow a use variance. But if your ordinance never did, you can't do that anymore. Our ordinance did allow use variances, however, this draft is suggesting that we don't do that anymore. And a use variance basically says, that you can vary the list, like you're permitted and special uses in any district. You can appeal to the planning or to the zoning board of appeals and ask for a use that's not otherwise listed in the district. So it's, instead of doing that, we want to urge property owners to use the conditional rezoning process, which is essentially the same, but you would rezone that land to get the use that you're looking for.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi there. Quick question, I guess for clarification. I was on the phone with the township manager last week. I had a few questions. And he had mentioned during the conversation that C1 was going to become C2 and C2 was going to become C1. Would you, I guess, either just kind of expand on that? Is that
Yeah.
going
You
on?
want to answer that too?
Sure. Now, we're not rezoning properties, C1 to do, it's just simply, we're just changing, for it to be like a hierarchy of C1, 2, 3, with 1 being neighborhood, 2 being community, 3 being, interchange. So, all we did was split the designation. So, but no change in the zoning map, the requirements are, the district intents are the same. We just changed the abbreviation.
Okay, so then everything now applies. So I should be looking at C2 stuff if I'm in C1, right?
Correct. Yeah, so if you're C1 now, you will be called C2 and you will be in the same district.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Come on in.
I'm Matt Peterson. I own property at 116 Riverside Drive, which is in the R2 area. I would ask the professional zoners and the planning commission to consider the one grid on R2, which contains the minimum lot area with public water and sewer. There is one lot in the zoning map that is, every other lot is non-conforming except for one, and that's 116 Riverside Drive. It has sewer and water. It's approximately just under 3 acres, 117,000 square feet. We would like to do a couple lot splits there, maintain the integrity of the neighborhood from Dugout Road down to the city limit. All the lots are 50 to 60 feet wide. They're all non-conforming with current zoning. We're looking to ask for help in figuring out how to get 2 100-foot lots, and remaining 190-foot lot, reserve the historic home that's on the property, create 2 lots to maintain, again, the character of the neighborhood. The master plan calls for preserving neighborhood character. The master plan calls for the future land use map is medium to high density in that area. But yet the first draft of this zoning ordinance calls for us maintaining a 3-acre parcel with 117,000 square feet. It would most likely be sold to a developer who would put a PUD in, which would not be consistent with the neighborhood. Neighbors have asked me to try to help create a situation with planning commission, with zoning, so that we could get, two houses put in, keep the historic home that's there. And, I asked a question about, should that strip be rezoned? Because again, when you look at R2, it goes all up the river in areas where there's probably not going to ever be public utilities. But we got one little strip on the other side of Riverside Drive, it's R3. This one little strip is R2. Everything is non-conforming in that area. So we don't really understand the intent of keeping it at 65,000 square feet, when R1 and R3 are 30,000 square feet, are actually maybe even less. They're actually 20,000 square feet with public utilities, and R2 is stuck at 65,000 square feet. So, that would be my only, comment, on the zoning draft. So, that was it. Thank you.
You are the person.
No comment. So you go.
You don't have to.
Okay, my partner and I are, John Castro, by the way, we're building next spring. We're currently R3B, which is turning into R4, but just reviewing the land use designation. I know, two-family dwellings are going to get removed from R3B or R4. I would like to, make the argument that, I guess, two-family dwellings and ADUs should be allowed in, R2 Riverside and the new R4. I think I had a whole spiel here. I'll spare you it, but the missing middle was something that specifically mentioned just the variety of housing types available to people in Saugatuck Township area. Having that especially dwelling or two-family dwelling or townhome available for owners to be able to rent out one for long-term or have a multi-generation family housing situation is something that I think that's good for a lot of people. One just note about the R2, the description had something about single family and two-family dwellings, but the chart specifically only has single family dwellings for R2. The definition update was great, so thank you for that. It's very clear what you can now do.
Would you like to come up or?
Nick Watson, 6576 Grand Ridge Road, Township. Two questions, different ones. The first one is, you noted that there's going to be a whole new section under landscaping requirements. I understand how that would apply to developers, but I'm asking, I guess, for people who buy a lot or doing a single family home, are those requirements also going to be required for building a single family home?
No, those aren't required for single family homes, except for when we have single family within the Purple Dune area. There are some specifics related to the landscaping. And those are consistent with the requirements that Eagle has for landscaping in this area. Yeah.
My other question is, that one of the goals I know of this whole rezoning process was to make for more affordable homes. And as we were talking about, I know they use the square footage size that's required, definitely to make it more affordable. But has it been considered in what districts that maybe that you're going to make the lot size to be attainable, to make it more affordable? And what I'm referring to is that there are many places in the township that are adjacent to the cities or adjacent or nearby municipal water and sewer, which is, you're going to cluster their home, you're going to make, if they're going to change in any way that's going to allow for I'll use this property for example, like on, Old Allegheny Road, just off Blue Sky. There's a large acreage piece of parcel on the market for sale right next to the expressway. Seems like it's the perfect place for allowing a dense, tiny home development. Is there any vision going in there for allowing?
Yeah, so that's an excellent, example to use our planned unit development process where, where there are utilities that are available or serving that property, you can flex the minimum lot size. So what happens with a planned unit development is you do a concept plan that is based on what the zoning district would allow. And that establishes your base density. So let's say with those 30 acres, maybe the base density would allow 30 home sites. With a PUD, instead of doing 30 1-acre homes, you could flex that down, based on soil conditions, based on, topography, that you could flex it down to say maybe 1/4-acre lots or 20,000 square foot lots and cluster those, and that reduces, the linear feet of infrastructure of road surface, so it becomes more affordable for a developer, and hopefully that's passed on to future homeowners. So you could have those smaller lots. The other thing that happens in the R1 district is that right now in our current ordinance, we allow the accessory dwelling unit. So in the case of that parcel, you could have 30 homes plus 30, accessory dwelling units, so a garage with a living quarters behind it or above it. So now you're looking at almost doubling the density there, providing that affordability for someone buying in, because now they can perhaps live in the accessory unit and rent out the house. They could live in a house and rent out the accessory dwelling unit. So there are other ways that they can support the mortgage, the cost of construction, and things like that.
So is there any change though in current, let's say in the certain zoning areas, like R1, that they're going to be by right allowing smaller lots?
I think
or
so.
do they have to do that?
I can get you a comparison. I made a chart, so we can, and Dave might have it up, but I think we're a little smaller than what we were, right?
I think it's 40, 30, 20,
Yeah, so R1 used to be 40,000 square feet and now we're down to 30, so we have reduced it.
I'm a resident of SRVR. And we were kind of thoughtful when we saw, I'm hoping I'm started at the right time about the license. But an ordinance change about not allowing shed in the property.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I did receive some emails or an email from another resident.
That
on
would
RV
be
Park.
fine.
Yeah. So, I've noted that in our comment matrix, to revert back to what we had in the original. So, for RV parks, this draft of the ordinance said that accessory buildings are not permitted. Our current ordinance allows them, so we just want to rectify that and then call out the standards of the state too, because the state of Michigan has some specifics related to accessory buildings. So we're gonna rectify that. Thank you.
So what do you mean by that?
We're gonna revert back to what we had in the current to allow those.
They are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Donna, do you want to use the microphone?
No.
Okay.
But, all these, I don't know.
You know, like,
Here's one.
Donna.
Okay. Thing like this, a lot of, denser development, big plan, which is fine, it sounds like, organized. My question would be, who pays for all the infrastructure? This is going to create, much more density for utilities, for roads, for, steel. These roads are gonna. Yeah, so, who pays for all this? The developer, or is it gonna be taxed to the existing citizens, or, who pays for infrastructure? Is that been planned?
That's a great comment. I don't know that I have I'll give an answer. So, I think when our communities grow and there are more people paying into, say, if they connect to our water system or our sewer system, we're gonna have more users on a system that's in place, and therefore those users, part of those fees helps cover maintenance, helps to cover extensions. If there's a development proposed and utilities need to be extended, that typically is borne by the developer. That is not generally a cost that taxpayers would cover. There could be decisions where it's in the best interest of the utility system or the township to, say, increase the size that would be required because of needs for the system itself, and maybe the upsizing would be something covered by the utility fund at the township. But typically, running new lines that is borne by the developer. But then it's the users that pay for ongoing maintenance, of course. So that's one. When it comes to roads, our roads are part of the county road commission, and those fees and the cost of building roads is again borne by taxpayers, right? I believe that we have a millage for roads and trails. That's something that all property owners pay into, that millage. So as new parcels and people move into the community, they're also going to be paying into that road fund. And then when it comes to the schools, again, the schools have, I believe, millages too. They receive a portion of the taxes that we all pay go back to the school system. So some people might say that the more people we have, the more there are people paying into that system. I don't know that that's always a 1-to-1 ratio, but that is typically how those services are paid for. So yeah. And then we have private roads, and those are paid for by the developer. Then the cost to maintain those private roads is borne by the homeowners who use that road.
I was on school board for 10 years, so we want to have more students and benefit the community having more students. Get to keep our tax dollars here by having more students, so it's a very positive thing. But having more students doesn't cost us more. We get to keep more of our own money into our schools.
John Newland, 6548 Singapore Trail, and then business number 3350 to start. First of all, thank you. This is a huge one we don't have that reputation under. Clarity and uniformity is always a good thing, but I do have a couple of concerns as I read through everything that I'd like to maybe have you guys take a look at, or maybe Dave explain. Section 170B. I totally agree with the fact that it states that owners should take care of private agreements, especially with easements and things like that. But I would like you, and it kind of says that the township should be getting involved in that kind of thing. But I would push back to say that if the township is not enforcing zoning rules that are in place, and
with one of those neighbors or whatever, the township, I think, does need to take some onus of that. If, you know, we as a neighbor cannot make someone follow the zoning, that's the zoning people that should be making the do that. And then in section 4.30-C, there's a statement there that says drive-throughs are not permitted. We're in the C1 area, local commercial. The drive-throughs are not permitted, but there is no mention of standalone carryouts. And I did not know if that was purposely left out or just an oversight. My understanding that in our area, right, carryouts are not permitted. And just wanted to make sure what your take on that going forward is. And if there are carryouts going to be permitted, what are the parking spaces that are going to be needed? We currently have a situation where you can have 18 people lined up for a carryout, which that means there's probably 16 cars lined up for that. And then table 1050, minimum parking table, under the restaurant category, I see that it states that one space for every 2 seats, but it does not mention anywhere in there about employee parking, like some of the other businesses that are called out. You know, different business categories are called out, but they have to have a minimum of so many parking spaces for the employee. And under restaurant, there's not that at all. So I was wondering if that's just an oversight, because that could be 14 parking spaces that are taken up all of a sudden. And then section 10.80, the loading zones. How is it determined who needs the loading zone? Is it the size of the semis that come in? Is it the frequency of the delivery trucks that come in besides the FedEx or UPS or Amazon Prime? But what determines this? You know, right now, if everyone drives up and down, we start to keep this sign saying that there's a delivery truck and no longer parked along there. So that's pushing them into a shared driveway space or our parking spaces, which we can't do business. So I think that needs to be thought out or explained a little bit more. And then I guess my last thing is just my overall concern. We currently have a lot of great zoning rules that are in place that just are not being enforced. So what's going to, as you've done all this great work and a lot of it is amazing as far as spelling everything out, but if it's not going to get enforced, then what happens? I mean, right now that's the current situation where we're having the issues along the Blue Star with that signage that Mr. Janik had put out to say no parking along the Blue Star because of all the loading and the overall parking on both sides of the Blue Star, 15 cars deep some days. So if it's great that you guys are doing this, but I would just urge someone to take charge of enforcing the zoning that's already in place and the new zoning going forward.
I wrote down all of those sections and we will take a look at all of those sections. I think when it comes to enforcement, you know, the goal of this, and you can see from it that we're taking great strides to make sure that we've defined every use, that we've been more clear in the language. You know, even with some of the parking and the maintaining of gravel parking, I think the language is tighter in there in terms of maintaining it and even paving the driveway apron where a gravel drive touches a paved road. So we're learning.
And I think that's great. I have a stack of drawings here that have all been approved by the zoning folks. It's great. I'm an architect. I can draw anything and I can write. I've got the same drawings that have 20-some foot spaces in one thing. The next day it had 30-some spaces. The next day it had 36 spaces. Eventually 46, but none of these have been built. And the drawings weren't. The drawings weren't changed. It's just the number was changed. Or the most recent drawing shows 46 spaces, which still is not enough. Now you built, so who's going out? You know, it's great that people come and bring a drawing by an architect here, but if you're not going to the site to actually count the seats and to count the parking spaces,
And if what's drawn isn't being built, that's what we're having problems with on the Blue Star. And I've actually, in the last month and a half, 2 days have lost hours of not being able to open my doors because I couldn't even get into my own parking space.
Okay.
And so if the zoning people are not going to enforce these rules, the rules don't really mean much.
Just on that last comment, one thing we built in, I think it's in Article 13 is a site compliance zoning permit. So that a building couldn't get a CO or use couldn't be established until the zoning administrator or planner visited the site, ensured that everything was constructed for the plans approved by the planning commission. So there is that level of we build in it, either like when a site plan's approved, you don't get a building permit until your conditions of approval are met. And you don't get a CO until your site is built for the plan.
That's the way it used to be. I mean, we had to do that when we built out our space, but our neighbors did not. So it's inconsistent.
Any other comments before we shift into our regular planning commission meeting?
Most of this wasn't the part of the question and comments.
So we're gonna open our planning commission meeting, approve our minutes. And I think it's some time to discuss what they heard tonight. And some of these other items related to, again, what we heard tonight, they're gonna discuss. And if you have specific comments that you want us to look at, and you've written them on the comment cards, we can go through that as a planning commission. Otherwise, you're welcome to leave. You don't need to stay for the whole meeting. It is supported, but we'd love for you to stay. All right. Pardon? Okay, so this concludes our open house, and we'll give people a few minutes to step out, and then we'll move into our planning commission.
Thank you for coming.
Nothing on Zoom, any questions?
No.
There we go. Look at that. See?
Straight, I feel. Sometimes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I drove 16 years ago. Just waiting on my name.
Let's call the meeting to order, guys. So at this point, at 6:26-ish, we'll call the meeting to order. At this point, yes.
Yes.
All right, please, stand and we'll, say pledge of allegiance after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible.
We're gonna stay.
All right.
No fire, let's go.
Yeah. Point, about the agenda, any comments, changes? Anything with the agenda this evening? Hearing. Right here a second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Approval of the minutes. This is from October 17, 2023. We'll start with page 1. Is there any comments on page 1 of the agenda? Or the minutes? Hearing none. Moving on to page 2. Hearing none. Page 3. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we have public comment period. That's a point where the public can come up and speak. You have 3 minutes as an individual, 5 as a group. Like we have exhausted our public comment period today, but however, that doesn't mean that if you have something that you'd like to say, this is the time to do it. And this is regarding really our agenda items, but is there anyone that would like to?
I just have one other thing that,
Yeah, if you can state your name.
important part of this chicken script. Matt Peterson, 116 Riverside Drive. There was one part that I didn't bring up during the little Q&A part earlier, and that is, I noticed on the slides that there was talk about predictive development in the township, and I would suggest that not adjusting the R2 with the public utilities section, a little grid, would result in very non-predictive development. It could result in either a PUD type of development, or it could result in a large, giant family compound that would again not be in keeping with the neighborhood and community character. So that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have a comment. Occasionally, you'll see Joe Malacas tweeting something for Drive. Always curious on the agenda form that number 6 is public agenda items.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder why it's very limited to an agenda item. The reason I ask that is someone may want to come up and make a comment to you, but planning don't. You want to go home rather than stay through a meeting to make that comment. In reversely, the last public comment, number 10, says non-agenda. So why are you limited to non-agenda items? Something may come up during the meeting where we don't get an opportunity to comment, but we'd like to comment about it at the end of the meeting. So I would just ask you to consider those two limitations.
We have comment.
Realizing that probably be addressed after we get through the zoning ordinance.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
taking up most of our time. But your comment is well taken.
Yes. Yes.
Good evening, I'm Doug McIntosh from the 3315 Blue Star Wiring Business, the 6548 Old Singapore Trail. I guess it's been about 8 weeks. The township made the decision to have Greg Janik put up a bunch of no parking signs in front of the building. And I understand why. You know what? It was horrible to see a quarter-mile cars on both sides of the highway 4 days a week. It was really a dangerous situation. Unfortunately, because the issues and zoning has not been enforced next door, all those cars are now filling my parking lot. And there have been times where I've had to be closed 2 to 3 hours because my employees can't park there. And this is all based on decisions that were made and no one out there checking and reinforcing our zoning now. And while those signs are great, I'm going to be very candid with you. Next spring, if I come into full parking lot, those signs are coming down because those signs technically aren't legal. I know the road commission, they made it very clear with me, but what I'm asking you to do is let's work together to get this resolved before next spring, because it's going to be utter chaos. Right now, and I'll shut up, is 4 days a week, we have a line across the parking lot, cars trying to get in and cars trying to get out, but because there's no fire lane in the back, it's down to 1 lane. So that cuts off all parking on both sides, cause horrendous traffic jams, and it's going to get worse now because there is no, those signs are out there on the highway. So I'm asking you guys to address this because this isn't the neighborhood civil thing. This is a township thing. And to get, well, I'm going to stop. I think that's enough. I appreciate y'all listening.
Okay. Well, okay. At this point, is there Zoom today or no?
There is, but
But nobody.
nobody's commenting.
Okay. All right. At this point, we'll close the public comment period. Move on to old business, which is discussing the zoning ordinances. So at this point, Renee,
I guess it would, I think we're open to hearing what planning commissioners would like to talk about, but I think there are a few kind of bigger picture policy conversations that you might want to talk about. I heard a few people commenting on the accessory dwelling unit. Right now, our ordinance allows them in, Dave, you're gonna have to make sure I get this right, A1, A2, and R1. And I've heard comments from folks about wanting to see those in R2, the Riverside residential, and R3, the Lakeshore residential. So I think it might be something for the planning commission to discuss. I also highlighted, I mean, the reason why they are not in the R2 or R3. Several years ago, we talked about ADUs as a planning commission. And the idea was that the agricultural areas, because lot sizes are larger, as well as R1, because we have utilities and we're closer to services. There's also language in the master plan about sensitive areas, natural resources, limiting density where we have sensitive environmental features like the lakeshore, where we have, you know, the drainage, surface water runoff issues, where we have the shoreline concern, the river area where we have kind of concerns about our, you know, our natural river overlay is there. And so it's kind of like the competing interests, perhaps. So I think that's something you all might want to talk about. Some people have said, well, let's try right now, kind of allowing them where we have an ordinance, see what happens, and then consider opening it up to other areas like R2 or the Lakeshore. But that's something you need to talk about. The other is the lot size in R2, where if we do have utilities, we heard that comment from Mr. Peterson related specifically to that lot, you know, that's for sale on the river. And whether the smaller lot size in R2 where utilities are present is something you want to consider. Townhouses, we heard about townhouses and whether townhouse development should be permitted in R2 and R3, which relates to the accessory dwelling unit, right? It's basically, that's 2 dwelling units, and townhouses are 2 attached dwelling units. And then we heard about the parking, loading, enforcement. I think the other things are kind of minor that we feel comfortable addressing, but those are more policy related, and maybe there's others that you want to talk about. Yeah, go for it.
Do you care what order we go?
No,
Yeah, and you said this first. I just want to go on record relative to the ADU question, because we've had public comments and inquiries and discussions internally and with each other. Personally, I'm for allowing ADUs in all 4 residential zones. Especially in the, this is R3, that's the Lakeshore Drive zone that is already full of ADUs. And I've had neighbors and people that live there that have explained that to me, that there's so many there already, and some people that would like to have one feel they can't get one now because right now we're looking at maybe just starting in R1, dipping our toe in some. And it just seems to me we should go in all the residential zones. I mean, that's one of our goals with including with the and comedy.
I agree. Yeah, you guys should probably get to the point where you're doing both, straw vote or something.
Well, I guess, and I get what you're saying, but rather than, I would guess, I would like to see your matrix and what was really discussed tonight in order to really get a sense about the whole issue. So is it appropriate in going back to what attainable housing looked at as well, the advisory committee, and really look at that more in depth? I mean, again, this is not necessarily what I was thinking of doing in essence tonight. It was listening to the comments, getting it all in our heads and then go back and rethink about it. I mean, I don't think, again, it's something that we can do like a snap of our fingers. As we think about the entire ordinance, not necessarily take it piece by piecemeal. That would be my suggestion.
I agree.
And I hear what you're saying, but again, I would have to go back and look at the chair of the attainable housing, you know, what were some of the discussions and look at that and not necessarily say, I would agree one way or the other right now. I just got to put my head around it.
No, I think that's a good point. We should address the access issue here, because I've had questions with that. I had discussions today with our building officials about that. And I know we're trying to make our deadline for the two approvals that are needed by the council. So much is coming to light, and there's so much, yes. I'm sure everyone's spent as much or more time than I did this weekend doing it. So I'm just think maybe we should address that process.
Do we have any idea about things, the lake shore, and how many people already have buildings there? And how many people would like to have one there? 50% have them already, 70% already have them, 30%. So I mean, if 50% already have them, it's probably not going to make a huge change if the other 50% can put one up. But if you're talking about maybe only 10 or 15% have the accessory unit, are we going to have, you know, everybody running to Home Depot to pick up their accessory building to drop them in there? And, you know, and then going back to the Webster reference, is that what was originally thought of when these changes were proposed? So again, I'd like kind of like that idea, like if we did open it up, what would that mean? I mean, is it a small change, or this is a really big deal, and now we're going to have, you know, a lot of these things.
Well, it's also another question, like, as I went back to definitions just to really refresh myself on what we're considering accessory dwelling unit. Then I see there's several. I mean, we have accessory dwelling unit attached and detached, and you know, just accessory dwelling unit. And so, I mean, maybe there's, you know, you allow detached, not attached. You know, I don't know what. I mean, I don't have an answer for it at this point. I agree with Denise, where it'd be nice to be able to kind of think through some of these things. But
is that type of windshield survey something that one of the planning commissioners would like to do? I mean, like driving up and down Lakeshore Drive and noting, you know, it's gonna be hard to know exactly which are accessory buildings or not.
I drive up and down that or walk up and down there, and I would not know which one's an accessory and which one's.
So I don't
Whether
know.
it's an office space, how would you know that?
But I think Jen made a great point, and you know, we're kind of relying on, you know, neighbors are calling us, they're coming to see us. A couple were in the audience earlier that we can speak to the ADU issue, and again, I think maybe we do. I mean, if it's not that long and big an area.
I mean,
Maybe some educated neighbor could accompany one or two of us.
So either that, or we can also just say, like, before the next meeting, the leaves are down, it's a little easier to see the lots now. And we can all drive up and down and try to take a look at it. Well, I mean, at least you can make the effort.
The right way to do it. I really do struggle with that. For me to say, you got an accessory dwelling and you don't. How would I know?
Yeah.
The individual, I don't.
But
How do we verify what people have been saying? Almost everyone has one.
We
How
just
many,
made.
how many reports you got, John? Huh?
I think.
So, I mean, I'm saying, how do we?
I think it's
Exaggerated, is it true?
But once again, it's also more of a policy question. It doesn't matter. That's what we're
I think
going
you
to
do need to lean back into your master plan,
Yes, I
right?
agree. I
You know,
think we need to go back and then really think is it appropriate? And if we're thinking natural resources and protecting the public and, you know, rural character, is an ADU appropriate in every zoning district? I think we have to ask ourselves that question.
Well, we are.
and I think
Well,
that,
no, I mean, each individual, if we have to come to a vote.
and I'm not
can't
sure
answer that.
here if the committee, and I don't have the answer offhand with the, you know, say properties that are on low and septic, and they have a ADU. Does the county require another septic system, or can they hook into the system that the house has?
I understand from the health is that if you're adding another bathroom, that capacity has to be from a septic side. And so if I wanted to build up above me for the bathroom, I still have to get the approval of my septic. And that's through the health department, my understanding.
But it can be connected to the same system as the
It
house.
can be if it's got the right capacity, and the health department
What
determines
happens?
that, not us. They have to get the approval.
Speaking for the property owners. Really expensive property. Do they have a voice? But they want ADU.
That's what we're
Every
having
money
public,
out of line.
why we're having public discussion.
So I think we could come back to next meeting and, I mean, everybody,
Talk about
Yeah.
ADUs.
I'm gonna talk about ADUs, so we have to give everybody some time to digest it.
And the other things that were discussed in your matrix, as well as a comment card, it's like, okay, where are we at?
So why don't we talk about then, we're gonna put these comment cards online and gather comments. Why don't we pick a kind of an end date and then actually share the matrix and the comment before your next meeting?
What would 10 days out be? Again, we would have to go on the public website and then let people know that is the deadline. So at 10 days prior to our meeting, does that give you enough time, which then allows for you to get everything, Morgan, create everything, and get the packet out to us? 10 days enough?
What is the date of our next meeting?
December 19th. So then we could collect comments until December 8th.
Yes, it's Friday, might as well, right? And then come in and Monday the 11th, you just get everything together and be out.
And get the packet out as well.
Yep.
With the matrix.
Yep.
And the
That
comments.
sounds reasonable. That sounds reasonable to me, that again, you guys are the ones that are gonna have to work in it.
So the discussion meeting would be.
Yeah, I guess it would be discussion and kind of finalizing, and that means that we wouldn't have a hearing until January.
Would this be at 5 PM or 6?
Well, you gotta remember, the open house was a part of our meeting.
No.
We didn't have to be here. We didn't have to be here at 6. So an open house, so our regular meeting would be at 6. We wouldn't have another open house. Unless we were planning another open house.
No, but we've met at 5 a couple of times recently.
Well,
Just.
Because we had a lot of.
yeah, but that reason, it would be 6 o'clock.
We'll go back to 6.
Yes.
Stay sick.
Yes. Did you want our comments, you know, as we go through there, I mean, I have a couple.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
Yeah, I think we should.
That's
I know.
With each individual.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Section 2.40. So are we happy again? I'm sorry, section 2.40. The collective principal use. I still see in there, and we talked about this, if buildings are under single ownership or association control as a development complex, individual activities support one another. I still think that there's an issue with that. Unless that's what we want.
What is the issue? The temporary this property has to
Basically,
be-
individual activities need to support one another. But again, I'm looking back at the brewery. And our auto that, realizing that we approved that, but going forward, that would not have been approved if it would be under this new zoning ordinance. We would not be able to approve that. Correct? Did I read that correctly?
Hey, what's the?
We have an issue. We have something to get done, old ordinance, so they have to continue. We have an auto repair and now a brewery coming in. Those are not under single ownership. That would not be activities that support one another.
Yeah, why would you want those on the same line?
I'm just asking the question, are we going forward? If that came forward, and this was what our zoning ordinance would say, that would not be an approved, we would not be able to approve that. It would not be under collective principal use. Are we fine with that? I'm just asking that question. If that's really where we're gonna go, then I'm okay with, I'm okay with that, but
Unless it was like a multi-tenant building, which this does allow. With multi-uses and tenants under a single development complex. But if it's just a lot with just two different buildings and two different uses, that.
then we're not gonna allow
90%
that.
zoning ordinances don't allow that.
We're not gonna allow it. Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, I'm okay with that. Section 2.50, what happened with that one? Is there anything in there that, well, and again, similar land uses and how it reads, we're cool with that? Okay. Specialty accommodations. Why are we not allowing that in A1 and A2? Why isn't that, we allow campgrounds? But why wouldn't we allow specialty accommodations to be in that A1, A2? Specialty accommodations, it was. Well, again, by definition, that is our glamping. That's really what it is. And I was just asking why that is not allowed, also, as I look at the chart, under, accommodations, hospitality, and entertainment uses. If we're allowing a campground or recreational vehicle park in that A1 and A2 under special, why are we not allowing specialty accommodations in that? Under special.
Yeah, that seems like we might want, okay.
So that was.
Yeah.
Street facing garages, create, are we happy with that? Is that, because we had a discussion about that in regards to, I think the next, I don't know, whatever that was, that they weren't allowing it. So we're happy with the 40% and that, that's good.
But that we discussed.
Yeah. Okay, that must have been a meeting I missed, so, okay, all right, I was just checking. Section 5.4, 5.4. Specifically in page 5.6. Stream alteration. Is that saying that they can't put dredge and put a channel in there to make a marina? To protect the natural character of the rivers, I'm looking at L1.
Yep.
To protect the natural character of the river and the natural flow of waters, no damming, dredging, filling, or channelization of the stream will be permitted.
This is related to our National River Overlay District. So if that's the location, this provision is saying that stream alteration is not permitted unless it's approved by the appropriate state agency.
Would any stream alteration required? Army Corps?
But it's both equal and unborn.
This is just in the
That's,
natural river.
yeah, I know.
And I don't think, I don't believe any of it.
I have a, well, I understand, but if our zoning ordinance isn't strong enough, wouldn't our zoning ordinance supersede any agency?
We can't be.
This is all the model language that was included in the current ordinance, so none of this has changed. This is the model, natural river they just. Moved to the state, so.
I guess you can confirm that for our next meeting, because what I'm trying to think of speaking to is that whatever we can do to make sure that, we don't miss an opportunity here to maintain control that type of development is not starting to create, other parts of the river. We should do that at this point.
Well, we do have that in Article 6. So Article 6 is really all inland waterways concerning the increase in water frontage. And so that it's page 7.2, section 7.2. We have the graphic there in the new language, 720B. And that was actually currently under review. We got comments back from the township attorney, and it's been sent to the other attorney that.
Yeah, it's been, actually.
Yeah, so what your attorneys now, but the intent is that the water frontage should not be increased by excavation, manipulation of shoreline, whatever it may be. This covers all inland waterways as defined in this ordinance.
So since we're at that point, you know, I understand, I just wanted to clarify, because in the existing ordinance, the, section 720B, canals and channels, that language has all been removed.
Yes, we're trying to just reflect the intent of the commission, just as clearly as possible, just by saying that there's nothing, you can't do anything to increase shorelines for any reason. And the attorney has already supplemented this section. I could just be added again, but that will be the next draft.
So there'll be a change to this D water frontage? Or,
Yeah, correct. 720B will be supplemented with some legalese there, just to.
all right.
They said yes, you captured the. They correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we captured the intent and that we clearly stated it, but they had a couple of provisions that they wanted to add.
All right.
Based on the importance of that particular paragraph.
I believe.
That would apply to the overlay district and outside the overlay district, including any inland waterway.
And we're using the word inland waterway because it's defined at the stage versus channel is not defined.
It's we have an inland waterway as well as inland lakes and streams, so inland waterway, those are inland lakes and streams, but there can be inland lakes and streams that are not inland waterways, so like man-made things, other unnamed rivers, and they could potentially, so you can do it to like a man-made water body or a smaller stream in your backyard, but not the inland waterways as defined in the ordinance and the
Can we go back to section 4.50, please? Commercial and industrial requirements.
4.5.
Page 46. Question here is, concurrent zoning ordinance have a chart they will put 40B residential lot building and setting requirements. That seems to have gone away.
So John, what section are you again?
I'm in 4.5 because there's on 4.4.
4.4?
Well, I'm referring back to, okay, on page 4.5, let's start with that. B applicability. There's reference to table 440A or table 440B. My question is, 440B, the chart seems to disagree.
Say it again.
Are you on page 4.4-5? Okay. And there's a chart labeled 4.40A. And two lines above it, and applicability lots, number 1, it says table 4.40A or table 4.40B. The last draft had a 4.40B.
Yes,
So was that?
it's gone. So we actually went full circle on this one. We had originally had so 440B was lot building and setting requirements for residential uses within the commercial zoning districts.
Okay.
And so we originally had them that you can only get through PUD. Then we, in one of the middle drafts, we added those into Article 4. But then there was a number of comments, I think 2 meetings ago, about allowing the smaller residential lots and commercial. Then what if somebody buys and plats them out? They're less than the commercial lot size, and then they wanted to put a commercial building on a non-conforming lot that was intended for residential. That's about where that conversation ended. When then you guys said, you and Lane just talk about that and figure it out. So what we thought is that well, okay, let's just allow for these residential uses in commercial district, but if you want to plat smaller lots, you have to do it under a PUD, and then we put that table in the PUD section of Article 6.
So addressed it.
Yes. But yes, you're correct, that 4.4B should have been struck. I'm glad you mentioned that, though, because that's one thing I did want to mention is that table did do PUD check.
All right, that helps. There's the page missing, right?
I have a question on Article 12, signs. Specifically section 12.40, under prohibited signs. It's basically about feathered signs, maybe balloons. I'm just wondering if we think that we really, if we want to help and encourage business, especially during the summer, would those be considered temporary signs that a business owner can come in and request it to be a temporary sign? And again, not all of them, maybe inflatable, something like that, should we take a look at that in order to help our business owners during the summer? That's, instead of being prohibited, maybe it's temporary. So we can put that in the matrix. I don't know. And they may take it in at night. They have to take it in at night and they put it, I know that there's ice cream place on this part of Douglas. It's on the other side of the bridge. They take it in and they at night and they bring it out during the day. So whether, and it's not being in the right of way and so forth, is that something that we should consider? So, something to put on your matrix that we.
So would those temporary signs be permitted for a certain period of time?
Possibly, very rare, Labor Day, something more Memorial Day to Labor Day, and then thinking that during the evening. So they would have to come in and basically, would have to be, maybe permitted,
So, and what's that? We do allow for sandwich board signs for all commercial properties, and we allow for temporary signs for 120 days for all commercial properties. So is there something that's not covered by those two provisions, or we figure like?
we call out feather signs.
What is it?
We call out that it's not prohibited, feather signs. That seems to be very popular.
Oh,
You know,
flag.
Go away next
they also, well, that's true, but right now they're very, very popular throughout the country. It's not just
You could say the same for banners too.
possibly,
But
you know.
sandwich
I
boards
guess-
are in here.
So I would just ask us to think about that, and put it on the matrix and,
Most of the feather signs are so close to the road that when people pulling in and out, they're having trouble seeing the traffic coming.
well, agreed. I think that there's going to have to be specifics in regards to allowing them. So again, I'm not asking for a decision tonight, but whether we should consider that.
So the question is, consider allowing feather signs as a temporary sign and treat it like.
Possibly. Yes, possibly. I'd like it for us to please consider it.
I think it's gonna allow, the possibility for temporary signs. Given what the business is, I mean, I mean, it's a winter business, it's need something to do. Typically for the winter, maybe they have a permit,
Yeah, that's why I think we say 120 days, they can decide.
You pick your one way.
May I?
Oh, sure.
I don't know how we're doing that.
Then the non-conformity, chapter, Article 21, I need to read that again. There's always, mainly expansion, when we come down and the non-conformity and now they're asking for expansion of the building, is that clear that basically we're trying not to allow that, or did I read in there that we are we want to allow that? Did I read that right?
You could expand it on, the building is not conforming, you could add on to it as long as that addition conforms to all building requirements. So you can add on a different direction, you can add on as long, only to an extent that it meets setback, or whatever the issue is. So the image there shows a building that's not conforming to a side setback,
Right.
and so you could, you can't, so if you see on the east side there, it's extending into the setback area. And then area B is if you extend it along the same non-conforming plane. Some zoning ordinances allow that. I think it's actually, I don't like it because you can really increase it's really increasing the non-conformity in my opinion, even though it doesn't get any closer, you could go, you have no limit about how far you could move on the same plane, which can have a huge impact on neighboring property. So what we're saying is that B, if you want to do that, requires a variance. But if you want to expand the building within the allowable building envelope, you can.
Right, so if you're outside the building envelope,
Easier.
So on that graphic, you could do A without a variance,
right.
B requires variance.
What happens if I wanted to put B in front of D? I mean, and that's outside that building envelope.
Variance.
But now we're beyond my possible setback.
Sorry, you said, what if I want to do B?
B, and I want to put it there.
Variance.
And does our zoning ordinance allow us to consider that, well, okay, we go and consider the variance, but would I not approve it?
Up to you.
Yeah.
I'm just, I make sure that if there would be a reason why we would not. Do that, is it? This, close to the water. Does it, again, as I read the. I'm trying to make sure I'm making the right ones here. Special exception, so when I look at E, I would look at E as a ZBA number, right? Non-conforming use, special exception standards.
No.
And now they're asking for a variance go beyond the building envelope and, closer, they're not meeting a setback, so they want to go beyond the setback.
No, you're looking, you have to go to Article 18 instead, which is the variance review. So anything outside of the level building envelope, you need a variance because of the.
Yeah, but there's a non-conforming,
Sure, there's a non-conforming use expansion as well, but that's not necessarily meaning, building is not conforming. You may have a non-conforming use in a building that conforms to all dimensional requirements.
Yeah.
So, but the non-conforming use itself may have an impact just by the amount of square footage involved in that intensive non-conforming use. So the zoning board also does consider expansion of non-conforming uses. Whether, and really it could be whether it could be in addition to a building, a conforming addition. But if you're expanding the non-conforming use, that square footage dedicated to use, the ZBA does do that, and it's a 50% max.
okay,
So yeah, you just have to make a distinction between use and structure, and it is,
Okay.
and they both could come into play in certain situations.
one more. And the other one was very.
Can I mention a couple, please? So page 7-15. In letter B, number 1. That came up today in the office on this. It's a language thing, but in E1, it says when nearby buildings along the same block are set back less than the required minimum setback. Is nearby too vague? Would be better to say closest or adjacent. Nearby could be 715. Value by nation. I mean, is this preferred it to be half a mile away if you're on the same lot?
I would think the intent of that was adjacent or next door.
We're gonna take Jason and plus.
Yeah, I think so. Typically, what we do is say along the same block within 200 feet.
Okay, well, that's pretty exact.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, yeah, I think exact is better than.
Yeah, and the same block space as well, so you're not comparing across the street or.
Street behind.
Thank you.
Now we. Some of my comments tonight, I just want to say, because I'm going through a lot of this thing with the building official. I was going to be here. We are collecting to these notes to submit them by December 8th, but since we're going to come to the things that maybe you bring up.
Oh, yeah, this might be. About in our last meeting, we talked about residential lots that did not have stormwater. You were gonna go with an acre.
Or to 45.
Yeah. I don't, and I thought we couldn't go below that.
We talked about, well, an acre minimum is usually typical for development septic. That's what we were kind of guiding on all this. Lot size based on smallest I could go with, that's. I don't remember if it had sewer and water.
Is there anything in the minutes?
Anyone else remember? I think it would be, there was been a discussion about going below that, and I thought the discussion was, no, we're gonna go back to 1 acre. If there was a recommendation to go down to like 35 or 30,000 square feet, you said, no, we're gonna stay at, we can put it back to where it was because the old ordinance. Which district are you talking about? Which zoning district? Well, really, it was the residential zoning districts without sewer and water. I don't, I never. I am actually looking at table 3 on page 3 dash. But let me have page 3 on this.
Right now, for example, R1, our minimum is 40,000. Without, without,
It says 30,000 here.
but in our proposed ordinance, it's 30.
Is this the proposed?
Or, it says 30, right?
It's 30.
More than 40.
The board's information today. Remember, the logic was just strictly that the minimum lot size for having well inside.
I don't know, the second category, the one with public water and sewer. In R2, it says here 65,000, but the negotiation that we did discuss making that. Right, so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
Wait.
So the R2,
At the last meeting, we wanted R2 to stay at 65
without, but go to 40.
But we lowered it for if it has.
Yeah, to 40.
Or 1 acre, right? I think.
Right, well, I'm just going by the chart. The chart still says 65,000. Believe should be 40.
43.
So you wanted the minimum in R2 with water and sewer to
Right.
be
40,000.
So an acre is 43,500. So when you say 40,000, do you mean 40 or do you mean 43,500?
40,000.
Because today in the public.
Well, what do we think? I don't know. That's, they're similar, but yeah, it's not 65, it's down closer to 40,000. So,
Yeah.
I guess I was just look, all these end in all zeros, so if that matters or not. Fine, too.
You've heard someone in the public ask for 30,000 R2.
Okay, but that, I'm just, the 40,000 was a note we'd made last time we owned.
Well, I would call it 1 acre well.
So, I mean, let's just decide.
I just wanted to bring it up so that we know to discuss it next time. 'Cause I don't agree.
Okay.
And I just, but I'd like to have some time to go back and look and see.
But you recall going, not keeping it 65, we do. All right, so the question was, is it 45, 40, or 30, right? Just make a note. Can I say the question on ADU language until the next meeting, or just mention it now?
Not mentioning now.
So page 8.3, 8-3. In section 8.30, it says your dwelling unit. In number 6 area. Questioning language here of
Okay,
8-3. All right.
okay.
Okay. A, general requirement 6 area. So the question is, okay, so these accessory dwellings square footage shall quote, or here, not exceed 50% of the principal dwelling.
Or,
Is, I mean,
there's an or. 60 square feet, whichever is less.
no, well, I'm suggesting it just go with 600 square feet of living area. To be more
That's
precise.
because we now allow smaller homes.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So say your house is 750 square feet. If we allow the ADU to be 50% of that, that's 300 square feet. Wow. We probably want to.
Isn't it more logical and fair to make it 600? Just
600,
Have a
right.
flat number,
I
so
think so.
we can take out the 50% line.
Although you could then potentially have. You could have, say, a house that's 600 square feet or 750 or 700. And then the ADU could have a garage component and the living quarters and be bigger than the house. So from a scale perspective, what's considered the ADU could be bigger than. And maybe that's okay.
Yeah. And I also think that 600 square feet should be of the living area, not counting if there is a garage or.
That's correct.
Right, okay. So those are my suggestions.
We need to look at what language we want.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We can save it for next time, but I'm just suggesting, take away the 50% of the main home. And it's,
Just noting also that in R2, 3, and 4, the minimum footage is 750.
We did agree to that, right? Yeah. That our minimum house size for houses is 600 in those 3 districts and then 750 in the others. But that was tied to the ADU discussion, right? We said there was a debate whether our minimum house size was going to be 750 or 600. The Housing Advisory Committee recommended 750. And some planning commissioners advocated for 600. And I believe that we reached a compromise saying 750 in the districts where ADUs are not permitted and 600 in the districts where ADUs are permitted. So if we change where we allow ADUs, we are going to need to talk about the minimum house size as well.
good point.
They were. We don't have to connect them.
No, I think the thought was that if you're gonna have a smaller house, you're gonna need some other building there to have the way to shovel, more the bikes.
Yeah.
That was the problem, otherwise they'd be sitting outside. I think that probably.
Well, the difference between a dwelling unit versus a garage. I mean, if we're talking about ADUs as a dwelling unit, then we need it in, we've got to separate that in regards to storage a little bit. I mean, it's a dwelling unit, it's a living space.
Yeah.
Versus a garage.
Which is power.
Again,
That's still pretty off.
So again, I understand, you know, do you allow more than, in essence, are you allowing more than two buildings? You have a principal building and an ADU. Well, we don't want people parking car, you know, cars and all their stuff out. Oh, okay, so now we have to have a full barn or garage. But they don't necessarily have to be on more than one building. So how many buildings are you gonna allow on a lot?
We don't have a maximum.
We don't,
We never know.
Yeah, so as long as they meet the setbacks, right?
Setbacks and lot coverage.
Yes. Then if you have a big garage, big pole barn, that means you're gonna have to, you may not be able to put an ADU in.
You could only 600.
Right,
Square feet,
or
right.
there's gonna be, that 600 takes them over the lot coverage, then they're gonna have to figure out someplace else, like over your garage, right? You know, more than 600 square feet. So, and we solved that yes, we solved that issue, they're all linked, right?
On page 8-21, under stables. Item B, setback is stated, excuse me, C for parking. Parking lot shall be set back at least 100 feet. I thought we changed it to 1,000 feet from abutting residential property line.
I don't remember talking about stables ever.
Where are you at, Jackie? Sorry.
821.
The last meeting.
That could be 8.292 stable.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that, when we had similar for, I think it was also for the rural businesses, we had 50. And I think all of those, I would push to 100.
I wasn't here for the parking chapter. That's why I don't recall that.
Well, if I looked at the regards to section 8.290, right?
Correct.
Yep.
If you look under D, are we not allowing any lighting? 0-foot candles in front?
Along the lot line.
Along the lot lines, okay.
Yeah.
And I have a question about lighting fixtures. I just want to clarify on page 9-3. It's a large fixture that's shielded on the top. And yet that's being cited as non-compliant.
It's just the lighting section under the cap, so it could all like that. So if with a bollard with the cap like that, you like the light source have to be actually in that cap area, fully cut off. Otherwise, the light is going to go off.
You're looking at leaving the figure in the center.
Correct. Is that the one you were referring to?
It is.
So yes, it's got the cap, but even with that, the fixture itself is exposed, so it would have some light with that.
I just bring that up because that's what we
Right.
installed here.
And we checked with the township attorney on that, and there is case law related, what did he say, related to the township, and
Basically exempt itself from its own zoning, governmental buildings.
oh, I did hear that the township ordered a modification to that bollard light to comply. Yeah,
And we discussed that a month ago, and hasn't seen any action or any updates, so I think we need to pursue that. Just that we'll double check this issue with staff, because this illustration is clearly all.
I'll leave the money authority to say the township.
We have to lead by example.
but I.
It's your grandfather's power at this point.
I think we need to just follow.
Anyone else?
I think there's some massaging to be done on page 7-4. Section 2 D, dock regulations. And I think maybe the best way to go forward with that, Lynn, is for you and I to have a one-on-one conversation. So property lines are cited as the goal was to create harmony between neighbors with docks and lifts and all the accessories that go along with them. So it's clearly stated that a dock should be 20 feet away from a property line. Well, there are other situations that aren't technically property lines, but they're general common element lines or limited common element lines within a PUD. And the same principle would apply there. You would want to propose, you'd want to create harmony between property owners in that situation, but that's not covered here. But it's not technically a lot. So I'm not saying it needs to be changed. I'm just saying it deserves some discussion.
So I'm hearing that there could be, if the planning commission decides that that's a concern and something we want to address, that when we talk about lot line and setback, that we also refer to general common element lines and limited.
Yes. For the same, the same principles apply.
Right.
Yes.
So Gordon, is that, in regards to this, is that only associated with the PUD?
No.
Or could it be something else that?
Well, I'm not aware that GCE and LCE live outside PUDs. I thought they were exclusive.
You could have a site condominium that's not a planned unit development.
Okay.
Okay, so using the word the common, do we have to define what common?
It's all in state law. Okay. So I think
It's just taking these principles and applying them into condos and state condos, right?
Well, and we're using the term lot in the zoning ordinance, so we're sort of early on in the ordinance, we say that lot covers either a platted lot, site condo units, or a land divided parcel. And so we're using the word lot kind of in general, but you're right, we don't address conventional condo where there's none people. So we'd have to, we did that in the provision, explaining how we measure setbacks and building space and separation for conventional condos with no lot lines or no site condo lines. So, and that's in this Article 7, and that is new. But we would have to write something similarly for that section. So I definitely follow you on that.
And then a second side of this coin, and that is, it says no dock may be constructed or installed unless received prior approvals and stuff. But what I've learned is that I was told that this happens quote unquote every day, that people will install that appropriately, get the approvals, and they grow it. And gentleman brought up the idea of enforcement. When someone starts to grow their dock property with lifts and larger lifts and so forth, it proliferates and it crowds out other people. Adjacent property owners have one recourse right now, and that is take your neighbor to court, which isn't a great recourse. It would be better if there was some way for the township to say, like, no, we authorize this, you change it, you have to go back, or else something else can't be. Yeah.
More boats, more neighbors.
Yep. And I hear that this happens a lot. So this goes back to the idea of enforcement and just creep. Right? They have great rules, but they can, if we allow them to creep, they're not great rules.
But are your neighbors? The way I understand zoning is, our enforcement officer isn't going out and looking at property. It's only done by, because your neighbors have made a complaint.
Mm-hmm.
So again, they creep, but if the neighbors aren't willing to come in and say something to the township, then you would never know.
But they do, and when that's happened, basically they're told what Gordon
Well,
just
I
said.
agree, if your neighbor said that, I agree, we should enforce that, but again, it's,
Yep, he's spot on.
is.
I've been over with a few.
It happens a lot.
Dock is a formidable. You have to get a
like removable docks our legal permits those with certain standards. They're not.
So you do get a permit through Eagle, not the township for help, or how many?
We require it now as well, both right view, seasonal or permanent.
So part of that permitting process would entail the plan with dimensions, and so that would then be on file. So that would seem to me that as an enforcement action, you'd be able to take that plan and then go out there and measure what's there to determine whether or not it's creepy.
So who enforces that?
Well, if it's permitted through the township, it would be the township. Would be great.
I want to interject here because I like that word straightforward. I've been here for over 5 years now. First year we went through a budget. That was on my wish. Enforcement, code, and it's always been shot down. Now, we did take a major step in the last year by bringing Cindy Osmond as a full-time building officer who does some enforcement work, but she's just one person. It's never been approved. So what I would employ planning commission is support this and speak up to the board about the need for this. City of Douglas is just hired a part-time enforcement officer. You know, there are 1,100 people in a very small area. We're 3,500 people, 30 square miles. So it's important. It's going to keep coming.
Yes.
Because it came up earlier in this meeting. You know, oh, you got a great new.
Wasn't it brought up? Haven't they done anything? I remember you.
I've been harping about this for 5 years to the board, and it never gets. One person. I think it's a good time because of what we're doing here. And as the comments that were made sooner, it's great to have new zoning ordinance and improve measurements, lot sizes, and all this stuff. But you need support, you need backbone. What do we need to do as a board? Maybe the planning commission writes to the board, right? Or comes to a board meeting, speak up. We have the power to do. The budget question we can address.
Keep it in front of us. Let's get through this.
But when we celebrate, it's a big way to take this to the board. So believe me, I'll be talking about enforcement at that point. It's great. Maybe we'll add something.
All right, are there
Thanks.
any other, are there any other comments from the commission? No? Okay.
They have one more. Okay. Yeah.
What's going on behind the gun shop?
I would wait for that.
Yeah, we can wait.
Pass that one. We're talking about this.
Sharon, I'll make one last question comment.
Okay.
The rest will be in this write-up we're working on. So on page 11-20. Article 11.110 man-made water bodies. So on page 11-20. Point number 2. So questioning and suggesting, right now it says creating water bodies 1/4 of an acre or less in size. Suggesting it might make more sense if you say strike less in size and say or more.
What number are you on?
2.
Oh, obviously.
Creating water.
Well, water bodies bigger than that are prohibited unless they're part of a PUD, they're for agricultural uses, or they're part of, a special land use.
I guess the question that came up is, koi ponds are really small. We don't permit those. And I don't think we're suggesting we start doing.
This is, a koi pond. I mean, does a koi pond meet the definition of a water body? Or is that more of a landscape feature?
Yeah, I think it's a nice landscape.
Yeah. So this is related. We spent this ordinance, this water body creation was was something we created after we worked through a lot of our, mining projects.
Or other development,
Yeah.
related.
I mean, we have had someone come in who's interested, who already has a small pond on the property. They want to make it bigger, but not for the purposes of any, I mean, they're not gonna be mining or selling or taking anything on site. But they realize that the only way to do that is for a PUD, but they don't intend to do any subdivision or build any more houses. It's just, a beautification of something for beauty and, but
So I guess my question is, does the language in paragraph 2, does it address if the water body is more?
if it's more, then it's regulated by the planning commission. And
So
you
that
get
language is somewhere else?
all right here, and
Yes,
it's
that's-
part of the page before.
In the,
Creating water bodies over 1/4 of an acre. It's permitted in the township only in the following circumstances. If it's part of a PUD, when it's developed in conjunction with a golf course, when it's part of a reclamation pond for mineral extraction, when it's for firefighting, you know, like one of the drug hydrant ponds, or if it's part of an agriculture, related use that meets the definition of camps.
all right.
I think it's actually pretty well thought out, because our original, we had talked about not allowing anything over that required for detention. Kind of how we wrote it, but I think as Renee and David were more thoughtful towards it, it's better defined and it makes sense to me.
And you should do too. I think the term water body should probably be struck because we don't define that, but we do define inland lake. So I think maybe we say inland lake, because an inland lake can be artificial or man-made on impoundment and so on. But I think we do need to make the distinction between an inland man-made lake and a landscape feature. So maybe there's within the definition, we say not including some sort of landscape scale of how their water. Yeah, something like that, just sort of put on some short threshold that we just don't touch.
So you would change water body in all of section 11, like one more now, very inlandly.
Yeah, I think so, because since we're now using the state definition for inland lake and stream.
How about if somebody says, well, no, I'm making a pond, just a pond.
That's our
So-
definition in inland lake, right? Yes.
Yeah.
but-
If it's just covered, I mean, you hate to have somebody come and say, why I'm not doing the thing.
So yeah, we would want to maybe like put pond in there and say
Somehow
the
or another,
inland
we're
lake.
gonna have to try to think about whatever definition is, like, you gotta make sure you cover everything.
Because right now we're silent. We don't use the word pond anywhere. So
No, we purposely took that
we
out.
took that out. And it's not in definition, I guess.
The definition of lake doesn't include ponds, but that's kind of like, just because it's.
Because people do come in and want to put in a pond, so.
I think we just need something that's.
And I do it.
That's some sort of minor, landscaping water.
All right. Thank you.
That was it?
For now.
Well,
Right.
okay.
I'm glad we took this time and
Yeah.
taken this. Right.
So the next part is that, either David, you were talked about doing the, putting the, survey and the survey monthly, or we have an account here at the township. But we'll get that survey with the comment, question on the website. And we'll continue to gather these comments through the 8th. The deadline, and then that'll be compiled and included in your packet for the December planning committee meeting. And I believe we would meet at 6.
Yeah.
Like our regular.
Yes. Just to be clear, the public hearing and vote. Has been posted.
So there, yeah, we wouldn't have the public hearing. It would just be planning commission discussion, but I want to make sure you're all committed to reaching decisions that night. And that January would be the public hearing. Is that agreed? Am I seeing nods and seeing commitment?
As long as we get that information so that we have enough time to think about it.
By December. If not sooner.
You would get the
Do
packet,
the next time.
you would get the packet on time. I think we're good about getting you your packet.
Yes,
a week prior. Yeah. Morgan's a huge help.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, so that concludes old business. Move on to new business. Seeing none. Go on to communications and just obviously we have township board report, staff updates, and then we'll leave a comment for PC comments as well. So maybe you can those here at that point. So at this time we'll go on to township board reports.
You'll love it. It's gonna be the shortest one ever. We live on November 8th, and it's 59 minutes long. 4 of us were there. There was 1 absentee. Only 2 things I want to report. The first one is very relevant to this group. That's when we voted to extend the moratorium on non-residential project until the new zoning ordinance is finalized. We technically extended it for 6 months. I think our hope and intention is that we don't go 6 months, but there's a couple of months what we're doing here. And the other thing is Wiley Road assessment. We're in a special assessment district of 4 properties to the west of Blue Star Highway on Wiley Road for water connection. That's been agreed to legally with property owners. The special assessment district will not start taxing them till the winter of 2024. That's my report. Thank you. Short and sweet.
I have a staff update. The township issued an RFP, a request for proposals for a corridor plan for Blue Star Highway. And a recommendation to hire, Progressive A&E for doing that, with Progressive A&E and hasn't gone to the board yet. But I wanted to let everybody know that there will be a steering committee established for that project. And if you're interested in participating, we'd like 1 planning commissioner. It would ultimately be a decision of the township board. We have multiple people interested. But speak with me or Daniel if you'd like to participate. That would include probably, it's probably an 8-month commitment. Maybe 1 meeting a month. Some might be virtual. It would be a great learning opportunity if you're interested in that topic.
Did you say how many total would be on the committee?
I didn't. No, I don't know how many total would be on the committee.
I'm just curious who
I
else.
think there would
is
be
being
a
invited.
board member, people from Allegan County Road Commission, from the fire district, from our township engineer. Yes.
When will the actual study take place?
So that is a great question. The goal would be to start doing some of the background data collection for existing data as soon as they're awarded. But we don't want to do any new traffic counts until sort of the season opens. But we wouldn't want to do anything now because it would be skewed with interchange flows as well as.
Wasn't this one to happen quite a
No.
No, it was relatively new. But the first proposal that came forward bothered me because I think it said start in November and hit by March. And I talked with Mr. Franco.
Yeah.
He's like, that's the slowest traffic time. Why would you do that? And then, of course, next year we have the added challenge starting in April, I think.
That's gonna skew it.
In, the roundabout.
Well, that's gonna really screw
I
it up.
mean, we're always gonna have something, right? We can. Okay, we're aware of it and we'll look to the professionals to give us their best.
As long as they're aware of those concerns.
That's in the RFP, the roundabout construction is in there as part of our existing conditions. So, just know that it's a study, right? We still don't have jurisdiction over that roadway. We are hoping that the collaboration with the county road commission will help advance maybe some innovative solutions that, not financially, but
I mean,
yeah, and they've been part of the initial conversations. They reviewed the RFP as well. Yeah, so we do want their collaboration. Yeah. That's all I got.
I think it's great that staff has got it at that point where we're collaborating with my county, and that's great. So I know it's a slow process, but it's moving forward, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lane. Then on the PC comments, open up the planning commission members, the anyone with any comments? Anyone about please? Can I? Yes, Mike.
I was just curious, what's got an email to what the devastation is going on behind the fence,
Called lot clearing by the own.
right? And
I think the intention, correct me if I'm wrong, but the intention is to market it itself.
And there's nothing with regards to our tree preservation that came into play with that.
Yes, we haven't passed it.
That's true.
Not the one. Because it's been so long.
Isn't the current? Currently, if you could clear cut your property.
Yeah.
There's no buffer, all the stuff that we don't.
Say that below.
Huh?
Don't say that below.
Yeah.
There we go.
Some people think this person.
Wow. Anyone else? Just throw a reminder out there that there's still as goes on.
So the Vanport, yeah, that, has been, the special land use expirators and people. I did hear that they may be coming in to accept. That would require.
Because they want to remove more sand, is that what they're?
I think because they're not complete and they're also interested in dredging some of the lakes that they have because it's not deep enough. For, fishing.
It's gonna be 10 feet.
I mean, it should be a fishing pond. That's, well, there's been a lot of truck activity leaving that property.
But the town has been contract for a long time, it's done, so that looks great, so that's a great lesson learned. Everybody, your hard work.
Yeah.
I guess is there any update with any of our, top grade, are they done?
Yeah, top grade,
And we're happy with that?
We're happy with that.
Okay,
We have one for maintenance, near the maintenance agreement to record, but I know that they're in negotiations to sell the property, so it would be good to have that maintenance agreement with the future purchaser.
how about, brewery?
I believe that they're working on changing their plan and,
Are we not coming up on close to a year?
they have a year, yeah, I'm not sure.
I didn't ask Daniel about that. There was, the discussion was because of the moratorium that there was some leeway
Might
with
give
that,
them a little
but
bit of leeway.
you're right. You're coming up.
Yeah, that's what.
But, they're working through their building permit process right now with, we needed more, detailed foundation drawings from them. So, Auto camp, I know that, well, there've been a lot of shifts at the village. So that has caused some delay, right, because of leadership changes. So, Daniel continues to be in discussions with new leadership there and, new council members.
Are we also not coming up on a year with them?
They're at the same time.
So, and I've only asked
So
them.
there's good comments that we might want to ask that they come to us to extend their approval. I mean, I think that's a really good point with our new ordinance. They may want to see what the new ordinance provides them, right? Maybe there's more opportunity, or maybe there are more constraints and they want to stick with something else, but either way, we'll I'll coordinate with them.
But I think we need to point is that whether there's a moratorium or not, if these people want to come in and ask for extension, we should require them to do so and do that in every case. And we should be reasonable with these people. Sometimes it takes additional time, sometimes it takes additional financing, but I think they have to come in and ask for it because I think we set a bad precedent. But, well, they're still working on it and it's okay. If our ordinance says 1 year, they have to come in.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Yeah.
Right.
So I'll contact them and just ask for a letter. I don't recall if that's something that I can approve or you, but however it's done, we'll make sure that.
I mean, it would be like a 2-minute.
Yeah.
Just show up here and this is what happened in the last year and we think we can get it done in the next 3, 6, 9 months and we can have them in and get it out of here in a few minutes, but I think that's the step that we should take because that also goes to enforcement. We're not enforcing our own role with these deadlines. And they can attend by Zoom
Yeah.
if they have a date.
Okay.
And there's one quick question. Just want to confirm, I'm curious, will everyone be here on the 19th? No. That was an issue at one point. That's great. That's I want us all to be here.
You gotta go into public comment? Here we go. Okay. Yeah, we have to go on to public comment. If there's anyone that would like to same rule applies.
I just had one, following up on your comment, Dave, there was a chart that Cindy gave to me after the previous planning commission meeting, and in R2, you had 30,000 square feet with utilities and 65 without. And when I checked back after that meeting, Cindy said, well, for some reason, it didn't get changed on this draft, so come to this meeting tonight and let them know that they had previously on this table 11.2 had a 30,000 square foot in R2 with utilities, because 40,000 would do, I mean, it's still twice the size of every other lot, and it would do nothing in that change. Really. We go back, it's just table 11.2. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think we talked.
Pardon my eyes are bad, I can't read the names back there. Denise, I wanted to kind of, I guess, share my experience and talk about how does it exactly work when somebody knows there are zone violations going on and you talk to a neighbor and then you call the township. I can't speak for anybody else. I can only speak for my experience. But my attorney met with Lene earlier in the year to try and think, go through all the zoning violations with our neighbor. One of those was that carryout is not zoned for its own, was brought up. Well, a few weeks later, I followed up with Lene and said, hey, where are we with this? My response I got was, I'd like to see your permits for your fast charging stations. So that's the response you get when you call the town.
You're logging. I like I have to say something, which you guys can hold it. Go all on this. More of a question on that. The language now is with or without sewer, public sewer and water. I see no reference to community sewer system. Public sewer and water, that wouldn't be septic, well and septic.
What is the community?
Yeah, like Ravine has it, and a couple of the other developments, it's assisted you get approval from the county health department and the state. Where you put in a system, basically,
Septic, a large septic system that can serve homes, that homes, you know, yeah. So, I don't know, address that, how you feel, but I think it's something that could happen. Anyway, just wanted to mention, I'm just not clearly understanding from the non-conforming use sections, talked about it a little bit. Well, not quite understanding this distinction between the non-conforming structure and building versus the non-conforming use of the land. So if somebody were to have a resort, a commercial business in a residential district, hypothetically, and the building is burned down. What do you do? I mean, rebuild. Read this, I don't come out with it clearly.
I think can't you rebuild as long as you stay within the footprint? Because you're not expanding it, as long as they stay within the footprint? Is that right?
Well, if you have a non-conforming building, the building can be rebuilt. Well, if it's a non-conforming use, that doesn't necessarily mean the building is not conforming. So, I mean, I believe it could be rebuilt. Can you do check on that so we can have that? Sure, yeah, I think that could be some. Then we can come back and watch it one more time. So, no, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, nobody on Zoom, I see.
Nope.
At this point, we'll close, public comment and we'll move here.
Second,
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.
thank you. Thanks, Bill.